Hello there. Today I'm taking a little wine from Spain, particularly from Aragon. This is Cuevas de Arom's Cantals Garnacha. It's a 2020 vintage, and this is from Calatayud. Now the winemaker here, Fernando Mora, is a master of wine. He started making wine back in 2008, and the name Cuevas de Arom, the Arom is Mora, spelt backwards. Fernando has been interested in making wine since quite a young age, despite not actually coming from a family with a winemaking history. He actually started out making his first wines in his flat in Zaragoza, perhaps not ideal surroundings for this. Being from Aragon, he has a passion for the predominant local grape variety Garnacha, or Grenache as the French would call it. Originally, he started Cuevas de Arom in the Campo de Borja region, but then moved to Calatayud, where in partnership with Bordegas San Alejandro, he has managed to gain, through some of their growers, it's a cooperative, has managed to gain access to some excellent old high altitude Garnacha vineyards, such as Cantals. Cantals is a vineyard of sandy red clay soils. The vines here are estimated to be about 70 years old, and the vineyard is planted about 700 metres above sea level, so there's a real cooling influence here. These are unirrigated bush vines, and actually the iron-rich sandy soils are covered in slate. There's a loose covering on the surface. The wine's 100% Grenache. This is all farmed sustainably. It's hand-picked, and 50% of the fruit went into the fermenting vat as whole bunches. Fermentation went on with ambient yeasts and was performed in large old oak barrels. At the beginning of maceration, there was a daily punch down by foot, actually sort of the winemaker climbing in and pushing the cap of skins back down into the barrel. And maceration lasted for an incredible 80 days. And actually what happens when maceration goes on that long is that actually you stop extracting more tannins and you start polymerizing some of the ones that exist. So you tend to end up with a smoother tannin as a result. The wine then aged for 14 months in a 1.6 hectolitre concrete egg. So there was no oak involved in the aging there. This is bottle number 1230 of 2511 that were made. So it's a very small production wine. So let's see what we make of it, shall we? From the get-go, this is a wine that has just a medium depth of colour. It's a relatively dark ruby red, but you can see through it really quite easily. So it's at best of medium intensity. Swirling the wine, it's got 14% alcohol, and it seems to be clinging quite readily to the glass, and there we go, it's starting to produce some quite pronounced tears along the side of the wine glass. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? There's a rich, juicy, quite delicate red fruit. There's almost a sort of a raspberry note, but then there's a slightly meaty, slightly reduced touch to it as well. And some hints of spiciness. Starting to get some really juicy, lovely red cherry notes through there, actually. Really quite sort of vibrant, juicy red cherry. That's very attractive indeed. I could nose this for a long time. Those are really beautiful red fruit perfumes coming out there, with perhaps some slightly spicy overtones, just perhaps a dusting of white pepper or something like that. There's quite a lot of finesse to the spiciness, but there's a lovely intensity and plenty going on in there. That's a beautiful complex nose. So let's taste it and see what we make of that. On the palate, the wine has a richness, and it's full and mouth-filling. That 14% alcohol is giving a roundness. However, this is not a hugely structured wine. I mean, Grenache itself is not hugely structured, and it's not been aged in new oak, so it's not gained from that. There is a very fine structure, actually, a very smooth, sort of slightly velvety nature to the texture of the wine. And this is all round a sort of a warm, rich, ripe, almost sweet licorice Pontefract cake sort of mid-palate. There's some really quite nice length, and some of that beautiful juicy red cherry fruit that was starting to come out in the later stages on the nose is becoming evident on the finish. There's a lovely purity to the fruit on this that's very enjoyable. There are those sort of slightly high-toned spices, perhaps coming across a slightly more sweet spice here, less white pepper, more sort of cinnamon or something like that. Although normally I would use cinnamon to describe oak tannins, this is slightly more high-toned than that, or cinnamon ginger perhaps. But yes, something quite exotic about the spiciness just towards the end of the finish there. As for whether the wine would age, I'd be intrigued to see. I mean, there is a reasonable structure here. It's not a firm structure. There's good alcohol. The acidity is enough to make the fruit lovely and juicy and fresh, but it doesn't sort of stand out particularly. I would imagine this is a wine for drinking in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I probably wouldn't age it for 10 years. I would probably have difficulty keeping my hands off it in the cellar, actually, because it's really attractive now. I think this would go with quite a broad selection of dishes, and it would sit alongside them rather than overwhelming them. It's got this sort of rich, plush, quite relaxed, mellow nature. It's a very impressive wine. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. That would be fantastic. Do consider sharing it with anybody you think might be interested. Do also consider signing up and following us on YouTube. It would be great to have your support there. And if you have any comments, please leave those in the comments box below. It would be really interesting to hear what you think about the wines we're trying, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that's related to that. Most importantly, however, do please try and join us for another tasting in the very near future, won't you? It'd be great to see you there. Bye for now.